For 6 years, a chunk of your life remains shrouded in mystery, with no recollection of even a single moment during that period. You're clueless about where you were, what transpired, or why you were abandoned. This isn't just a tale of vanishing, it's a narrative of a reappearance that posed more riddles than the disappearance itself. A group of 5 individuals ventured into the jungles of Cambodia. 6 years later, only one of them resurfaced on the road. A man bereft of identity and past, he was an enigma. The whereabouts and fate of the remaining 4 are a chilling enigma that makes the blood run cold. And the most chilling aspect of this story is the silence of the jungle and the silence of the lone survivor. This saga unfolded in 2017. 5 young adventurers, volunteers, and explorers united with a common objective: to discover a lost Khmer temple hidden within the impenetrable jungles of Ratnakiri province, northeastern Cambodia, one of the wildest and least explored regions on Earth. A dense wilderness, swamps, no roads, and total disconnection from civilization, this was their undertaking, an unparalleled adventure. Guided by Liam, a 30-something ex-military man proficient in logistics and safety, the team embarked on a journey. With him was Chloe, a well-prepared medic who had meticulously assembled the first aid kit, from antidotes for snake venom to remedies for tropical fevers. Ben, the tech-savvy member, carried all the gadgets: GPS trackers, satellite phones, cameras, drones. Maya, a historian, was the one who conceived the idea of locating the unnamed temple, a structure famed only through legends among the indigenous tribes. Lastly, there was Ethan, a documentary filmmaker tasked with capturing their odyssey on camera, offering us a glimpse into their successes. They meticulously prepared for nearly a year, studying maps, purchasing superior equipment, and consulting experts. They were fully equipped. Dear friends, please help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Please like and subscribe to our channel. It will motivate us to make more videos like this for you. 3 weeks worth of food, water filters, signal flares, and a satellite phone with multiple batteries. They weren't casual travelers. They were meticulously prepared for an expedition. Their plan was straightforward: rent an SUV, reach the last village, and trek approximately 60 kilometers through the jungle using old French maps and satellite images. The anticipated travel time was roughly a week each way, with check-ins every 2 days promised. The initial 3 days went smoothly. Several brief messages were sent, indicating all was well. They were on schedule, and the jungle was unlike anything they had experienced before. Pictures of their beaming, perspiring faces against a backdrop of verdant vines and trees were attached. Ben's last message arrived on the 3rd day, stating that the signal was becoming weak and they were entering a low-lying area. He expected to make contact again in 2 to 3 days, once they reached higher ground. Since then, no further communication has been received. 3 days elapsed, then 4. A week now? Initially, families attempted to allay their concerns. The jungle, they reasoned, was causing poor communication. Perhaps a lack of signal was the issue. However, as the 2nd week elapsed, it became evident that there was trouble afoot. A rescue mission commenced. Cambodian authorities mobilized their military forces, who were subsequently joined by volunteers from the missing men's native lands. Yet, Ratnakiri presented itself as a green inferno. From the air, it remained concealed beneath a dense expanse of trees towering dozens of meters high. Navigating the jungle on foot resembled searching for a needle in a haystack the size of a small European nation. Every step was arduous, and they were forced to clear their path with machetes. The climate was oppressively hot and humid, teeming with mosquitoes and snakes. 12 days into the search, one group stumbled upon their final camp. Situated approximately 20 kilometers from where the last message was dispatched, it offered a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The finding was both encouraging and unsettling. Tents remained standing, orderly positioned, a chilly campfire nearby. Dishes dotted the ground, along with several bowls and mugs of metal. Sleeping bags were inside tents, though empty. Personal belongings like clothes, books, hygiene items were still present. It appeared as if the inhabitants had merely risen and planned to return momentarily. Yet this wasn't the most peculiar aspect. The peculiar aspect was what was missing. There were no indications of a fight, no blood was found, no signs of a wild animal attack with torn fabric or claw marks. All crucial and vital survival items such as backpacks, satellite phones, GPS navigators, weapons, a first aid kit, and most of their food supplies had vanished, alongside the 5 missing individuals. Investigators and rescuers were left at an impasse. Multiple hypotheses emerged. The most straightforward theory was they got lost. Liam was seasoned enough to avoid such an oversight. After all, they wouldn't leave their camp with all their gear behind. This incident was likely an attack, but there were no guerrilla forces in these jungles. The neighboring tribes encountered occasionally were generally peaceful and avoided outsiders. An assault by poachers or smugglers, possibly. However, they would have left signs. And why abduct 5 foreigners? That would cause unnecessary trouble. Wild animals? A large predator like a tiger or leopard would have left a distinct scene. The search went on for another month. Helicopters hovered over the jungle. Rescuers scoured tens of square kilometers without success. It seemed as if the 5 explorers had simply vanished into the ether. Eventually, the active search was discontinued. The case was deemed an accident. The 5 adventurers were classified as missing and eventually presumed dead. In mourning, families lost their loved ones, and time moved forward, leaving the tale untold. The dense jungles of Ratanakiri held its silence. After a year, then 2, 5, it seemed the story would forever remain shrouded in mystery. However, 6 years later in 2023, an unexpected event occurred. On a bustling highway just outside Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, authorities stumbled upon an enigmatic man. He walked barefoot along the roadside, in tattered remnants of what once were clothes. Emaciated and covered in grime, his skin and bones showed through numerous old scars. His beard was thick, hair matted into a single knot, and he paid no mind to people. His eyes held an empty, detached gaze, unresponsive to any sound. He had no identification on him, leading authorities to believe he might be another homeless individual or mentally ill. They took him to the nearby hospital for examination. A nameless patient, mysteriously discovered, was admitted into a ward for treatment of exhaustion and dehydration. His origin remained unknown to everyone. He became another heartbreaking anonymity among the bustling city streets. However, one diligent young intern, captivated by unsolved cases, recognized him in a police report's photograph. A sense of familiarity sparked within him, despite the man's dirty and bearded appearance. He delved into old case files, scouring for missing persons from the past decade. His efforts bore fruit when he stumbled upon Ethan, a cheerful documentary filmmaker who had vanished during an expedition in 2017. The likeness was uncanny. To solidify his suspicion, a DNA test was administered. Samples were sent to a global database for comparison. The result arrived weeks later, shocking everyone. It was a perfect match. The enigmatic and injured man discovered by the highway was indeed Ethan, one of the 5 adventurers who vanished in Ratanakiri's jungles 6 years ago. His reappearance did not yield any explanations. Instead, it ushered in fresh, more profound dread. The query lingered: where was he for all those years? What befell the others? And why remains he mute? A medical evaluation offered the first alarming hints. His physique bore the signs of his torment. A multitude of old scars marred his back, arms, and legs. The doctors deduced these wounds were inflicted by a sturdy yet blunt object, possibly a stick or a vine whip. Some of the injuries dated far back, others more recent. Distinctive ring-shaped scars surfaced on his ankles and wrists, as if he had been imprisoned or bound for extended periods. The wear on his joints, particularly knees and ankles, mirrored that of very elderly people, implying he either traversed much over rough landscapes or endured prolonged laborious tasks. Tests revealed no remnants of contemporary food, medications, or poisons in his body. For years, his diet consisted mainly of plant-based foods and potentially raw meat. He hadn't cleaned his teeth in 6 years. No signs of soap, shampoo, or any other chemicals were found on his body or hair. Completely isolated from civilization, he was a mystery. Yet the most alarming aspect was his mental condition. Diagnosed with severe dissociative amnesia, he didn't recall specific incidents from his past. He couldn't identify himself, didn't react to his name, and showed no comprehension of spoken language in any form. All attempts by psychologists to communicate with him were unsuccessful. In the hospital ward, he would sit on the bed rocking back and forth without uttering a word. His eyes held an eerie vacancy. Occasionally at night, the nurses could hear him producing unusual, guttural sounds that echoed more like the calls or cries of a nocturnal bird rather than human speech. Looking at pictures of his family and companions from the lost expedition, he stared blankly as if viewing them for the first time. He appeared like a spectral figure, an empty husk of a man, bereft of identity and recollection. The investigation was revitalized with renewed zeal. Ethan served as their sole clue, their solitary eyewitness. However, he remained silent. Thus, investigators shifted their focus from his words to his physical gestures and conduct, aiming to construct a depiction of the events 6 years prior in the jungle. The investigators and medical personnel confronted an unparalleled challenge. They possessed the only living witness who had borne witness to everything, but his mind was sealed within multiple layers. Ethan became the target of continuous observation. Each movement, each gaze, each sound underwent scrutiny in search of a clue to the enigma. In the hospital ward, his behavior was akin to that of a wild beast trapped in a cage. Despite his fear of confined areas, he was more disturbed by the expanse of sky visible through the window. He didn't sleep at night, but rather dozed for brief periods, huddled in a corner and listening attentively to every sound. Any abrupt noise, such as a door squeaking or an object falling, made him recoil. At the same time, he showed no reaction to the sounds of urban life. The drone of cars, sirens, and television were mere background noise to him. His relationship with food was unusual. Initially, he refused hospital food, but upon the nurse's departure and return a short while later, the tray was found empty. Later observations through surveillance cameras revealed him searching frantically and stuffing food into his mouth, concealing what remained under the mattress, behind the radiator, and in the drawer of the bedside table. A long-time starved man, unaware of his next meal's timing, exhibited behavior difficult for psychologists to address through talk therapy. They eventually resorted to art and music therapies, providing him with paper, pencils, and clay. For weeks, these materials remained untouched. One day, he picked up a charred piece of drawing charcoal and started sketching on a piece of paper. At first, his work appeared chaotic, consisting of random lines and scribbles. However, over time, a discernible pattern emerged from those lines, a repetitive depiction of a river branching in two, a mountain with a unique sloping peak, and a collection of dots resembling either trees or rocks. The center of the sketch was always marked by a cross. This sketch caught the investigators' attention. Experts scrutinized numerous satellite images of Ratanakiri's province, a daunting task, aligning a crude child's drawing with thousands of square kilometers of real terrain. After weeks of meticulous work, they aligned the drawing onto various jungle locations on maps and found it. They discovered a correspondence. In one of the most secluded and inaccessible regions that the initial search party hadn't reached, the landscape perfectly mirrored Ethan's drawing. There was the same river with a fork, the same mountain with a distinct indentation. This isolated valley was enclosed by almost vertical cliffs, reachable only through descending the cliff by rappelling or traversing a single narrow fissure filled with rocks and overgrown with vines. During the initial search operation, this area had been tagged as impassable and avoided. Now they had a precise objective. However, the cross in the center of the map remained enigmatic. Was it the location where he was captive? Instead of asking about the burial site for his friends, another team of specialists were simultaneously engaged. They were linguists and anthropologists who studied the peculiar guttural noises Ethan produced at night. After sifting through numerous hours of recordings, they discerned these noises held a specific structure, repetition, and rhythm. It was not meaningless noise, but rather a form of communication unrelated to human language. The experts hypothesized that it could either be an imitation of animal sounds used for communication or a rudimentary tongue he had been taught. They then played him various natural sounds. His responses were dramatic. Rain and wind soothed him, whereas certain animal noises instilled fear. Most notably, he responded strongly to the cry of a scarce Cambodian hornbill bird that inhabits the highlands. Upon listening to the recording, Ethan huddled in a corner, shielding his head and trembling, emitting soft whimpers. It was unadulterated animal fear. An ethnobotanist was summoned to tackle the problem. He meticulously inspected the garments Ethan wore and also sampled from his hair and beneath his fingernails. Under a microscope, he identified spores of an unusual fern species and pollen from a flower that thrives exclusively under specific conditions, on limestone cliffs standing over 500 meters above sea level. This discovery aligned perfectly with the facts. Both the horned bird and this fern were found in the secluded valley depicted on Ethan's map. Now, the investigation had 3 separate pieces of evidence, all pointing towards the same conclusion. A map traced from the subconscious depths, a startling response to the call of a regional bird, and microscopic plant particles that could only have accumulated there on his clothes. Unmistakably, all occurrences involving Ethan and his companions transpired within this valley. A fresh exploration was organized, deviating from a rescue mission to become a police operation instead. The team consisted of Cambodian Special Forces soldiers, an investigator, a medical professional, and a guide from a local tribe intimately familiar with the region. Their objective extended beyond locating traces of the missing. They were also to brace for any unexpected encounters. The valley concealed its secrets, leaving everyone curious about the fate of the group members. Were they still alive? If so, what state would they be in? If abducted, who held them captive? An unknown tribe isolated from civilization, criminal elements establishing a mountain stronghold, or something inexplicable by rational thought? Questions outnumbered answers. Ethan was also readied for the expedition, not as a participant, but as a detector. The team concluded that keeping him nearby, even within the safety of the camp, could stimulate fresh memories or responses useful for the fieldwork. His health condition slightly improved. He started eating normally and stopped concealing food. Yet, he remained silent and unresponsive, displaying no signs of awareness. However, upon being shown a map with the target area and the valley marked, his behavior took an abrupt turn. He exhibited signs of distress, gasping heavily with eyes filled with fear. He moved away from the table, stood up, and violently banged his head against the wall, emitting that repetitive guttural clicking noise. The physicians had to administer a potent tranquilizer. It was the most pronounced reaction he displayed during his entire hospital stay. Despite being unaware, his body and instincts retained all memories of the impending terror in that valley. In a few days, the team took a helicopter ride at dawn to the mountain range's base, beyond which motorized vehicles couldn't proceed. They faced several grueling hiking days ahead to reach the remote valley entrance, a fissure in the mountainside. Worsening weather and thick clouds loomed overhead. Upon entering the jungle, they were met by an oppressive wall of moist air and the raucous symphony of unseen beings. Every Special Forces member stood battle-ready with their weapons, treading silently, communicating only through gestures. They didn't know what awaited them behind the rocks, but one fact was clear. They were venturing into a lawless territory where no one had come back from 6 years prior, almost none at all. Their quest was to uncover the truth represented by a cross mark on a map drawn by an anonymous man. Come hell or high water, they intended to unravel that truth. The explorers ventured into the canyon, and the world transformed. The cacophony of the jungle, which had grown familiar over the previous days, dwindled. In this valley there was an almost oppressive hush, disturbed only by the whispering of the wind through alien foliage and the faint echo of water. The air hung still and heavy. The local guide, who had been walking with assurance earlier, now looked around nervously, his countenance reflecting a primal dread. He informed the group leader that the elders of his tribe had always prohibited them from entering this valley, referring to it as a realm where spirits are quiet. The party proceeded with caution and trepidation, their weapons at the ready. Before long, they arrived at the river, the same one depicted in Ethan's sketch with its fork. The water was murky and stagnant. As they followed the riverbed, they started observing peculiar markings. Tree trunks bore marks that were not hunter symbols. Amidst the trees, traps fashioned from vines and sharp bamboo stakes, rudimentary yet lethal, indicated past or current inhabitants who preferred solitude. After numerous hours of trekking, they emerged into a clearing. Their sudden halt was due to the sight that met their eyes. Several decaying huts constructed with branches, clay, and palm leaves, encircling a vast, frost-bitten fire pit. The settlement appeared deserted. The Special Forces commander gave the nod, and the troops dispersed, starting an investigation of the buildings. Within one of these structures, they discovered the first undeniable proof. Leaning against the wall stood the identical lid of a plastic food container as those used by the missing expedition. In another hut, a patch on a leaky roof was made from vibrant blue nylon fabric typically found in backpacks, along with a bent and charred metal spoon nearby. These were belongings of Ethan's group. They had been there. However, there was no sign of the people themselves after searching all huts. The investigator then scrutinized the map Ethan had sketched. A cross was present, but not at the settlement site, rather at the foot of a cliff to one side. They followed this lead and discovered the location. 4 small mounds arranged in a circle with river stones marked the spot, 4 graves. Upon ordering exhumation, the investigator felt a cold shudder ascend his throat. They worked silently. In the first grave, shallow and containing human remains, was found an old brass compass on a leather strap, a constant companion of Liam, their group leader. The second grave held remains along with a small silver crescent moon medallion, a memento from Maya's father given before her departure. The third and fourth graves also revealed personal items that confirmed the identities of Chloe and Ben beyond doubt. 4 individuals arrived at this unnamed valley, concluding their lengthy voyage. A forensic specialist from the team carried out an initial investigation on the remains. He discovered no apparent signs of sudden or violent death, such as gunshots or fractures from blows. However, the state of the bones suggested a grim narrative, a prolonged, agonizing demise. Indications of severe exhaustion, scurvy, and other ailments stemming from nutritional deficiencies were evident. These people did not meet a swift, violent end. Instead, they suffered a slow, protracted death spanning multiple years. The question remains, who buried them? Moreover, what became of Ethan? Why was he the sole survivor? At that instant, the guide, who had been silently observing, summoned the commander's attention. He indicated towards the stone. On the rock's polished surface, at a height suitable for humans, there were faint scratches. These markings seemed to lead away from the spot, guiding towards dense underbrush at the mountain's base. They did not appear to be natural cracks. They were human-made signs. After them, the group found a concealed cave entry veiled by vines, leading to an area of moist darkness smelling of old, smoky air. Special Forces soldiers switched on their weapon-mounted torches and ventured inside, revealing a shallow yet clearly inhabited cavern. In one corner lay a collection of aged skins and dry leaves, suggesting perhaps a bed. The walls bore the same peculiar symbols as those found on the surrounding trees. Seated in the darkest, most remote corner was a man, an older, weathered individual with long gray hair, a beard, and clothed in animal hides. He sat crouched, his knees hugged tightly, gazing at the lantern light without fear but with a hint of wild intrigue. Upon hearing a Khmer command from one of the fighters, he remained silent, only returning a soft, guttural click, identical to the sound Ethan had made in the hospital ward. All pieces fell into place. This elderly individual wasn't affiliated with a primitive tribal group. Rather, he appeared to be of Khmer ancestry. It was plausible that he had been a former soldier from the Khmer Rouge era who had fled into the wilderness decades earlier to evade justice, eventually losing his sanity and becoming feral. He ruled over this valley as its solitary ruler. Then, one day, 5 strangers intruded upon his existence. It was likely that Ethan's group had become lost. Their equipment malfunctioned, and they stumbled upon the valley, fatigued. They were too weak to defend themselves. As for the elderly man, he wasn't a true murderer. Instead, he was a madman who had lived in complete isolation for 30 to 40 years. For him, these 5 were not victims, but rather companions, his own makeshift tribe. He didn't know how to interact with people properly. He kept them confined like animals. He fed them the same food he consumed himself. Roots, raw meat, larvae. He taught them his unique language, a series of clicks and bird calls. He disciplined them for disobedience, as one would a rebellious dog. Thus the wounds on Ethan's body. 4 of them couldn't bear such a life. Their bodies, conditioned to civilization, failed to withstand illness and gruesome eating habits. They succumbed one by one, and the elderly man interred them as well as he could. Ethan endured merely because he was the youngest and strongest physically. He spent 6 years in this hell. He forgot how to be human and learned to exist as a cave-dwelling creature. His escape was probably an accident. Maybe the elderly man fell sick and weakened, or perhaps Ethan, following some instinct, left the valley and walked until, by sheer chance, he encountered a road. The elderly man emerged from the cave. He didn't resist. He was taken to Phnom Penh. It was impossible to bring him to trial. He was declared insane, a man whose mind had been ravaged by decades of complete isolation. He was confined in a closed psychiatric hospital. The investigation concerning the vanished expedition came to an end. The relatives received the remains of the 4 voyagers. Yet Ethan stayed mute. His memories never resurfaced. He spent the remaining years in a care facility for specialists. Calm and compliant, yet his eyes remained vacant. Occasionally, while seated by the window overlooking trees, he would emit soft, hollow clicks. He was safe, surrounded by people. However, a part of his spirit lingered in the silent valley where spirits seldom speak, in a place that obliterated his identity and history, leaving behind merely a living husk teeming with silent dread.